Hey everyone, you're listening to Concentrates with Dr. T, a podcast discussing cannabis science, news, and hot topics. Please follow me on YouTube and Spotify. That's where the full form of this podcast is published on those two platforms. I'm Concentrates with Dr. T on YouTube and also on Spotify. You can also follow me on TikTok and Instagram for more short form content. I'm most active on TikTok at this point. I'm at dr.towle on that platform. I'll have it on the screen at Dr. Toll. So, with that, welcome to episode 5 of Concentrates with Dr. T. We have another kind of somber topic to discuss. The headline title here from this Today article is Virginia Mom Charged with Murder for Death of 4-year-old Son Who Consumed THC Gummies. So there's reported, supposedly another death here in the cannabis world in just a short amount of time. After so many decades and millennia, or centuries, certainly in millennia even, of no reported deaths, it's interesting that two kind of come up close in time together. Also, at a time surrounding when President Biden pardoned federal low-level marijuana offenders, which, to recap, released no prisoners, but may have some positive benefits to people who have already been in prison for these low-level offenses. But anyway, the other death was the cannabis industry worker, which I discussed as basically adding up to a couple things. I mean, a lack of safety, a lack of understanding of safety in general, and a lack of safety culture at the company at which it happened. And also, likely this individual just didn't speak up when she wasn't feeling well, or maybe she did and was, who knows what happened. But the two things that kind of go together are that it wasn't a great work environment from a safety standpoint. And, perhaps this worker also didn't stand up for herself. Maybe she did, who knows? But those are kind of two common problems that lead to tragic circumstances like this. So now we have this case of a 4-year-old who supposedly died as a result of consuming THC gummies. So you can see these headlines kind of repeat themselves in the sensationalism. Virginia mom charged in death of 4-year-old son who consumed large amounts of THC gummies. Newsweek asking, are THC gummies toxic to kids? Mother charged after child dies. Let's see, another one from NBC News. Virginia mother charged with murder after 4-year-old son dies from eating THC gummies. Very matter of fact. No, not even saying, thought to or anything. Thought to have died of THC gummies. And finally, CNN again. Virginia mother arrested, charged in child's death after 4-year-old ate THC gummies, police say. So just very quick to blame these THC gummies, but so that's making people think it's cannabis or weed, if you will. But we'll get into some of the details that have emerged from this case since it first came out, which, I mean, honestly, when I first read a headline saying a 4-year-old boy died from a THC overdose, I thought, no, he didn't. There's, that really doesn't happen. So there's got to be more to it. And as with any, especially sensationalist cannabis story, there is more to it. And we'll get into that here today on this podcast. So I like this article from Vice by Manisha Krishnan. She did a great job of giving a more balanced report than a lot of these other uh, news outlets. So even her title, did a 4-year-old boy really die because he ate weed gummies? And there's some assumptions even within that question. Um, so the tagline says, but medical experts are skeptical that this, kid died of eating a large amount of THC gummies. Yeah, I'm skeptical as well. So I'm not a medical doctor. I have a PhD in medicinal natural products chemistry and rather have an understanding of how pharmaceuticals are discovered, initially researched, and then eventually formulated into pharmaceutical drugs that are given to patients. So, as an expert within the medical community, I'm also very skeptical. So, let's get to it. A 4-year-old Virginia boy who died after allegedly eating a large amount of THC gummies may be one of the only known cases of a child dying after consuming a cannabis product, but medical experts say some pieces of the story don't quite add up. They sure don't. Tanner Clements died on May 8th, 2 days after his mother, Dorothy, said she found him unresponsive after he had eaten part of a weed gummy. More than 5 months later, on October 17th, Dorothy was charged with felony murder and felony child neglect. So really just shortly after, before or after, I don't remember exactly when Biden's pardon of the low level of offenders was, but just right, news breaking right as that's happening. What's up with that? I mean, first of all, I'll just comment right now. It seems like while the government and the powers that be continually like to signal on the one hand that they're moving forward on cannabis, you know, overhauls and making cannabis baking safe and banking safe and making legitimizing the industry and providing a legal path for it, maybe even legalizing it entirely. They keep hinting that they're going to do that, but then the media, which goes hand in hand with our government, continues to report negatively in these kinds of cases. And so, right when we're getting some good news about some pardons being given out, we're also being flooded with accusations of cannabis causing a death in a child of a child, which is not accurate, but it's the timing is certainly interesting. It makes me think that they're signaling right back that, oh, wait, well, no, actually we're not going to do anything, but as far as legalizing cannabis or making it easier on the industry, but we'll see. The time will tell. And then this idea that she's charged with felony murder and felony child neglect. At first, I thought the felony murder was way overkill. Like, it sounds like child neglect. I get it. She didn't take him to the doctor for 2 days at least. What she admits to is waiting for 2 days after she finds him unresponsive after he supposedly ate just a part of a weed gummy. So I get felony child neglect as far as her being charged with something, because it does seem on the surface as very neglectful of her to have delayed the seeking medical attention for something that kids, sadly they get into cannabis gummies in other states from time to time, and you get them to the hospital, get them care, they'll be fine. They won't be harmed long term. And you'll learn a lesson. It'll probably be embarrassing. You'll feel horrible for putting your kid through something like that, but everybody will be fine and you'll move on. So but to wait for a few days for things to just get worse and worse, and then ultimately for your kid to die, that seems neglectful. I don't have kids, so I guess I can't judge too much. But to me, that seems neglectful. And I'll get to some more details about how felony murder comes into this. Like I said, this is a very good article. I recommend finding it on your own and reading it again. So the 30-year-old mom said she called poison control on May 6th after Tanner ate part of a CBD gummy and was told Tanner would be fine. So right now she said she told them that it was a CBD gummy. According to a search warrant executed by the Spotsylvania Sheriff's Office and obtained by Vice News. She said she'd been watching TV on her phone when she noticed he was unresponsive. It's not clear how much time elapsed before authorities were called to the scene, performed CPR on Tanner, and took him to the hospital, but he was taken off life support 2 days later. It's also not clear who called them. So that's just a lot of confusion, even just about how he initially was reported, or, presented as feeling sick to somebody, whether it was his mother or somebody else, and then was reported to have felt sick and brought to medical attention. There was a lot of confusion about what happened, who did it, who called it in. Was it even his mom? Did her mom come over? Did a friend come over? Did a sibling come over and see the child? And that's only when medical attention was called. There's a lot of questions. Police said they seized an empty jar that had contained THC gummies, not CBD. Okay, so now this is already switching. She told Poison Control it was CBD, but the police recovered a jar that had THC gummies. THC is the main psychoactive cannabinoid in weed. Dorothy told police there was only one gummy left in the jar when Tanner got a hold of it. The search warrant quoted a pediatrician at Virginia Commonwealth University Medical Center saying that the level of THC in Tanner's body was extremely high, and that if Dorothy had sought medical attention for Tanner, his death could have been prevented. Now, I'm not saying that I think that this death happened because of THC and THC alone. However, I do agree that I bet if he had been brought to medical attention when it was first obvious that he needed it, he probably would have survived whatever it was that happened to him. And we'll get into some more details of what the current state of the news is, and I'll talk more about what I think as well. Police seized Dorothy's phone, believing it might show that she'd sought advice on what to do after her son ate THC gummies. But two doctors told Vice News the metric used in the search warrant to indicate that Tanner had high levels of THC in his body doesn't actually mean that. I don't really understand how that jumped in a paragraph there, but we'll just move on. The warrant said Tanner had a carboxy THC level of more than 14,286 nanograms of THC per milligram of either blood or urine in his system when he died. While that number sounds high, carboxy THC is a metabolite that the body produces after someone consumes weed, but it doesn't indicate how intoxicated they were. Actually, that number does sound high, so I want to talk about this. Something's going on here. So I tried to find the warrant, and I wasn't able to. If somebody can send that to me, I'd appreciate it. I'll look again and maybe do a follow-up on this to see what the warrant actually said. But I'm guessing there's a typo somewhere, because 14,286 nanograms of THC, it's supposed to be carboxy THC per milligram of blood or urine, works out to 1.4, I did the math earlier, 1.4%. And there's no way that anybody's blood or urine is 1.4% fully carboxy THC. That just is not happening. So I suspect that they really meant, I'm not sure, but I suspect that this is a typo, meaning 14,286 nanograms of carboxy THC per milliliter. In that case, we're kind of getting more into the territory of feasible and something that we can kind of use to understand maybe what happens. So in this article on PubMed, it is Chemistry, Metabolism, and Toxicology of Cannabis, Clinical Implications. It's from published back in 2012, but it gives a lot of information on the metabolism of THC and the pharmacokinetics of THC in the human body. So we're going to skip to the pharmacokinetics section, because what I'm interested in knowing is, like, what's a typical level of carboxy THC in somebody's blood after maybe smoking a joint, for example? Well, that's exactly what they answer here. A clinical study carried out among 52 volunteers showed that, let's see here. Wait, hold on. That's not the section I wanted. Metabolism and elimination. This is the section that gives me the numbers I want. So here it is. Sorry about that, guys. After smoking approximately 27 milligrams of delta 9 THC in a cigarette, so having a joint that ultimately contains 27 milligrams of THC, and smoking that, we're going to skip to the carboxy THC, peaks at 179.4 nanograms per milliliter after 4 hours. So it gives a very wide range, though, which I'm not surprised. But let's just go with that number. We'll round it up to 200. So let's say a typical 30 milligram joint results in about 200 nanograms per milliliter of carboxy THC at its peak, a mere 4 hours after administration. Now that can be delayed when this is inhaling, so that's going to be a fast absorption and then subsequently fast access to metabolism. So if a kid, for example, eats it in a gummy, that could delay these numbers a bit. The carboxy THC might peak after 8 or 10 or 12 hours, and it might not be quite as high of concentration. It might peak more at 140 instead of 180. But let's just use this as rough numbers, and let's say that 30 milligrams of THC will result in about 200 nanograms per milliliter of carboxy THC in your blood at peak. This kid was at 14,000 when they measured him at the time of death, supposedly days after he consumed a piece of a gummy, according to his mother. So 14,000, that's 70 times this. Now, this is a smaller kid, so say he's 10 times smaller than an average adult. So that accounts for 10 times right there, maybe, to be generous. But then there's another whole 7 times what a 30 milligram joint induces. Just 4 hours after smoking the joint versus days after whatever it was he consumed. So what I'm trying to drive home here is that he didn't eat one gummy. This kid ate a lot of THC. And we'll get into what kind of THC that is in a minute, because you think, oh, it's THC extracted from cannabis. No, it's not even that. So, but he consumed a lot. I mean, we're talking probably hundreds of milligrams at least of THC. So that's talking about what his dose probably actually was versus what it was reported to be. It confirms that THC was introduced into the kid's body prior to death, said Dr. Andrew Stolbach, an emergency physician and medical toxicologist at Johns Hopkins Hospital. But in isolation, it doesn't strike me as terribly high, and it doesn't strike me as insignificant either. That's really, wow, that's a way of saying nothing. No offense to this man, but I mean that he just hedged on both sides. I think it sounds pretty high. Like this kid got a big dose of it. Now, do I think it killed him? Still no, but we'll get into that in a minute. But bottom line, I think it indicates he had quite a high dose. Dr. Sherry Yafai, an emergency room physician and medical director of medical cannabis clinic, the Relief Institute, said the level of carboxy THC in Tanner's body could have been detected either soon after he took the gummy or hours later when it was being degraded by the body. But it doesn't necessarily mean that he took a lot of gummies. I disagree with this too. You're not going to get to that level in his blood at any point in time if he didn't take at least some hundreds of milligrams. I'm sorry, this is weird to me. Like this is like some. I mean, I get trying to, you know, to keep people from jumping to the conclusion that cannabis caused this death, but we don't need to, you know, sugarcoat things or make things up to do that. We can do it with actual information. So I think this means he took quite a bit. A typical 5 milligram gummy could result in this level carboxy THC in a child, she said, adding, I think this is horrific on all levels that even THC was available to a 4-year-old. I would like to see information on that. I'm going to keep digging into this, but I disagree. I don't think a 5 milligram gummy could do that, could result in, because we're talking about 30 milligrams in an adult resulted in 200 nanograms per mil in the blood. 5 milligrams in a child isn't going to jump up to 14,000. I'm sorry, it's not. And especially not days later. The peak concentration should have happened well before this child even reached medical attention and the tests that were done, based on the story that was told, unless he was eating them right up until the end, too. So that's a whole nother, I mean, who knows? But that's not what was reported at all. I don't think that's the case. So, and it is bad. It is bad that a kid got access to an adult product, quite frankly. And I'll get into the fact that adults shouldn't even be buying this garbage that this kid got into, and I'll get into that in a minute. But she said, based on the information available, she doesn't understand how Tanner died, and I agree. I think there's something more to this. It is certainly not the THC. Yes, it's a high level, but that did not kill him. We have seen, unfortunately, kids overdose at this age on THC edibles. What we have not seen is kids stop breathing and die or have their heart stop beating. The idea of someone dying from consuming weed is highly controversial, and there are very few examples where authorities have claimed it has happened. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says while a fatal overdose caused solely by marijuana is unlikely, marijuana is not harmless. And the National Institute on Drug Abuse says there are no reports of teens or adults dying from marijuana alone. So there we go. I mean, even NIDA, it won't come out and say that people die from marijuana alone. So what happened to this kid? I'll get to it in just a minute. We got a little bit more to get through. 2 Colorado doctors, however, claim to have documented the first ever case of a child dying from weed in a case study published in the Clinical Practice in Cases in Emergency Medicine in 2017. They said an 11-month-old baby died due to heart inflammation. The doctors said there were high levels of THC in the baby's system and that they eliminated other causes for the heart damage. But many doctors said their conclusion was a leap. So yeah, that was a hit job on THC too. So just because THC is present and somebody dies doesn't mean that THC killed them. So this is an 11-month-old that got into some THC, happened to die of something else, and then they found the THC in the blood and wanted to blame it on that. But there's no way. I've never seen any mechanism for how THC damages the heart anywhere. So just to assume that because THC was there and the heart was damaged, that THC damaged the heart, that's ridiculous. Stolbach said kids who've consumed THC can suffer from seizures, which can cause someone to aspirate and die if they're in the wrong position. But it's not clear what happened to Tanner. So yeah, anybody seizing for any reason can die because of how things can happen with that, or if they vomit and then breathe that into their lungs or whatever happens. That's a dangerous situation. So doesn't sound, I don't know if that's what happened to this kid specifically, whether it did or not. I still don't think it's THC that killed him, and we'll get to that. Before she was charged, Dorothy told local outlet WUSA 9 that her son suffered from a cardiac episode and that after he died, it was determined that something was odd with his heart. So here we go. Yafai said factors like a child's weight, pre-existing health conditions, and other things in their system could play a role in situations like this. She said THC can cause atypical cardiac rhythms, which could lead someone's heart to stop beating if they already had a bad heart rhythm. So there's one possibility. So he had a pre-existing condition. It was exacerbated by a large dose of THC asterisk, because this wasn't even, again, quite the THC you're thinking of that you get at your local weed store. And I'll get to this in a moment, or very shortly. We're about to get there. So it could be that it exacerbated an existing medical condition. Sure. But I don't think that's what happened either. Due to privacy laws, Vice News couldn't obtain Tanner's autopsy report. However, the medical examiner's office said his death was an accident caused by Delta 8 tetrahydrocannabinol toxicity. Delta 8? What the heck? Why are we just now being told this information? Delta 9 is the naturally occurring version of THC in cannabis plants, and what is extracted and put into vape pens and edibles when you purchase your cannabis from a state legal business, a state licensed business in a state that has an adult use or medical marketplace. That's the only way you can know for sure that it's Delta 9. Outside of that, if you're buying this at a gas station, at your drugstore, even Walgreens, I don't know who's selling these things nowadays at the head shop. All bets are off. You don't know what you're getting. They might say it's hemp derived. It might not even be hemp derived. But even if you take it at face value there, what they're doing to it is making it into something that's not quite the naturally occurring THC. First of all, it is an isomer, and because they're doing a synthetic transformation to CBD to create this Delta 8 THC in the first place, guess what? There's byproducts. There's leftover reagents. There's solvents, and they might not be adequately purifying this before they sell it in the gas station, because nobody's testing it. Nobody's testing it for impurities. Nobody's testing it for claimed content. They're just putting it in the gas station. You don't know what you're getting. And that's what makes it so dangerous. So this kid probably, first of all, yes, he probably did consume a large amount of this Delta 8 based on the carboxy THC numbers that were found in his blood. But with that large amount of this Delta 8 came a large amount of impurities and byproducts. So it could be that these impurities and byproducts overwhelmed his system with toxicity. That's one thing that could have happened. Or, honestly, I'm just going to call it like I see it. I would not be surprised if it turns out that he got into some other kind of drug that his mother didn't admit to. So sure, she admits that he got into these weed gummies, or these Delta 8, sketchy CBD cannabis, or hemp gummies. Yeah, he got into those. But what else did he get into? Like, really? Like, do you think that she's going to tell them about the meth that he maybe got into, or anything else? Based on the level of negligence and how long it took for medical care to be sought, it seems like maybe there's something that's being hidden, because a kid that just gets into cannabis nowadays, that's not a big deal. It is. Don't let it happen. But if it does happen, like, it's more understandable. A mistake was made. You're going to learn from it. The kid will be fine. But, if it's something else worse, yeah, you're going to lose your kid, right? So you're not going to say it. So I think that more likely than simply a THC overdose exacerbating an existing medical condition, I think it's more likely that there was either impurities in there that he ended up consuming at much higher doses than anybody else who consumed that product ever did, or he got into something else that his mom didn't report. So I'd like to see if they did any other drug testing in that autopsy report, but they already mentioned that you can't get that autopsy report because of privacy laws. So I'd be curious if they did any other tests for any other toxic compounds or drugs. But anyway, let's move on. So Delta 8, a cannabinoid like THC, adds yet another complication to the case. Delta 8 can cause psychoactive effects, but unlike THC, it's federally legal because it's derived from the hemp plant. False. It is not federally illegal. It is very illegal. But people say it's legal because it's derived from the hemp plant. But just because you can take CBD and convert it into Delta 8 THC doesn't mean it's legal just because hemp's legal. If somebody figured out how to take CBD and turn it into cocaine, would that make it legal cocaine? Absolutely not. Like, nobody would even think that. So it's just really funny to me that people think it's okay to make Delta 8 THC from hemp, from CBD, and then say it's legal because hemp's legal. No way. The DEA has made it absolutely clear it is not. They haven't taken a lot of action on it, which is interesting, but it is not legal. Because of its unregulated status, it's cropped up as a gray market alternative to THC in many places in the US. Now, it's not gray market because it's unregulated. It's gray market because it's very clear that it's illegal, but the DEA has yet to actually act on any of these companies. I'm sure they have a lot of, or that they have limited resources that need to go elsewhere in general. But the more things like this that happen, the more likely that federal agencies that can get involved will get involved. But it is just absolutely not true that these are legal. They're absolutely illegal, but they are widely available in gas stations and drugstores and head shops because they're kind of surfing under the radar a little bit. And that's what makes them very dangerous, because they're not tested for anything, contaminants or content. They can write 10 milligrams on there. It could have 1, it could have 1,000, it could have none. How did it get there? What, was it extracted with butane, CO2? Was it reacted with iodine? How much residual iodine is there? Was that tested? No, absolutely not. So you have no idea what you're getting when you're buying these from unregulated stores. And that's why I always recommend that if you're interested in THC or cannabis products, go to your state legal dispensaries. If you live in a state that has medical or recreational or adult use dispensaries, go there and get your cannabis products there, even your CBD, because guess what? Every single batch of product that's being sold on those shelves in a state regulated dispensary has been tested for content and at least some contaminants, and at least some that are relevant contaminants. So if it says 10 milligrams CBD, there's still problems, I'll admit, within the regulated industries, but it's going to be close most of the time. And so always buy your cannabis, your THC, your CBD products from state licensed dispensaries. Otherwise, you're putting your life into your own hands, quite frankly. And this Yafai agrees. Yafai said Delta 8 products have been chemically modified to achieve the desired effects because there's not enough Delta 8 that naturally occurs in cannabis plants. She said Delta 8 hasn't been studied the same way as Delta 9 THC. When you chemically manufacture items, things go wrong. Absolutely. When you're doing chemical reactions, there's side reactions. You need to purify those, and I doubt that anybody that's making these kinds of products and selling them in gas stations and stuff is doing proper purifications and properly testing and making sure their purification is working. In May, the FDA put out a warning about Delta 8 products, noting that none of them have been inspected or regulated by the agency, or quite frankly, any other body or company. The FDA said it received 104 reports of adverse events in people who consumed Delta 8 products between December 2020 and March 2022. 8% involved minors. Negative side effects included hallucinations, vomiting, dizziness, and loss of consciousness. At least 20 states have banned or restricted access to Delta 8. So Colorado, for example, has made Delta 8 illegal and said you have to get your THC from our dispensaries. Other states have as well to protect their marketplaces, and as well they should. These products are not okay until somebody can go through the proper protocols. And even then, it's still an open question of whether you should just be selling Delta 8 out in the open market when Delta 9 is available and much safer. These side effects that you see, I mean, sometimes you can hear of Delta 9 THC causing side effects like this, but it's very likely that Delta 8 can induce these side effects at a lower dose. Um, it's amazing in chemistry, the most minor change in one bond or one atom can cause very profound effects in the toxicity or the medical effects of a compound. And so, while a lot of people want to say, look, it's almost the same, it's just this a little, isomeric tweak. Well, yeah, you can't say that. It's now a totally different molecule as far as your body's concerned. Sometimes two isomers can behave very similarly in the body, but that is no guarantee. Um, I can think of an antibiotic, ofloxacin, was a fluoroquinolone antibiotic that was a racemic mixture, so it was a mixture of two isomers. When it was first marketed, it ended up causing side effects and taken off the market, and then they purified to the levo-only isomer and called it levofloxacin and remarketed it, and it doesn't cause those side effects. So, I mean, there's plenty of examples of one isomer either being not medically effective or causing side effects that the other isomer just does not. Um, the same is definitely the case for Delta 8 versus Delta 9. We need the FDA to get with the program and start regulating, Yafai said. You can't make hemp legal in all 50 states and then just let everyone add it, because what happens is bad players and people who are looking to make a buck are going to take advantage of the unregulated marketplace. So I agree with a lot of this. I mean, I think that you can and should just make hemp legal. So that was a good thing. But now that we're seeing what's happening, they're not being responsive. And there probably could be some, better responses from the feds, from the FDA, even just in the form of guidance saying, you know what, these are illegal. You shouldn't be doing this, and giving people a chance to, stop doing it. But they're not even doing that. They're just keeping silent, and that's the problem. And yeah, so in this, hey, it's legal now, and then silence. Uh, a lot of people are doing a lot of sketchy things, trying to make a quick buck. I agree with that, and they're taking advantage of it. And people, even people that haven't even reported to get sick, have gotten sick. People are being harmed. Honestly, if people that are buying this stuff at gas stations or wherever, they're being harmed, whether they know it or not. An obituary for Tanner said that he was an amazing, energetic, fun-loving little boy. He loved superheroes, being outside, playing hide and seek, and making everyone laugh. His family asked everyone who attended his funeral to wear a superhero shirt because Tanner not only loved superheroes, but was a superhero himself. Yes, it's absolutely tragic that he became a victim of neglect in this case, allegedly. I mean, she's just being charged with it. She hasn't been convicted of anything, but honestly, I'd be surprised if she isn't convicted of at least neglect. More details about Tanner's death will likely unfold if his mother's case goes to trial. The felony murder charge is another unusual aspect of this case. So, Nazgul Ghanoush, senior research analyst for the Sentencing Project, said felony murder charges are invoked when a person is committing a felony and somebody dies in relation to that felony. It's most commonly used in robberies, for example, if a robber is pointing a gun at someone and the gun goes off, killing the robbery victim. So this is where the felony murder starts to kind of make sense to me. At first, I mentioned it didn't at all, but if she was engaged in felony neglect of a child and then the child died, so that's murder in association with the felony that was ongoing. I can see it. it's a big thing that she's facing. I'm sure she's already feeling horrible, but she will likely face further punishment, especially, particularly if she's convicted. We'll see what happens. More evidence. I would like to see more toxicology done on this boy, but who knows? I don't think either party's motivated for that. The mother is not going to be trying to show that, oh no, wait, he actually had other drugs which killed him. Why? That makes no sense. And if the prosecutors are just trying to, blame it on weed and happy, to do so, blame it on THC and happy to do so for those, reasons, they'll probably not look further either. But I highly suspect that there's something else that this kid ingested that hasn't been reported. And if it's not that, then it's most likely contaminants that are present in this gas station Delta 8 that his mother had lying around. And that is absolutely tragic. So in Virginia, felony murder can lead to 40 years in prison. Ganush questioned whether Dorothy should even be tried criminally for Tanner's death. If she is criminally negligent, the question that everyone should ask about felony murder laws is, she said, is she as negligent as if she intentionally killed her child? Yeah, these are all questions I'll leave up to the lawyers. So this is another point that the article kind of closes with, talking about kind of, what went wrong here. Why didn't Dorothy seek help earlier? Right? Prosecuting Dorothy so harshly could also prevent other parents in similar situations from asking for help. If people realize that they're going to face these extreme penalties, it doesn't make sense to bring these problems to the attention of authorities, Ganush said. Media reports about drug-induced homicide cases where people are charged with murder for sharing drugs that lead to fatal overdoses have resulted in fewer people calling for help during overdoses, a Health and Justice Action Lab report found. So that's a different issue. But it's a good point. How we handle overdoses and when they're brought to medical care can have a big bearing on whether people continue to do so. And if you punish people very severely for seeking medical care or for after seeking medical care, you will discourage people from seeking medical care, and more people will consequently die than otherwise would have, or be severely injured. But more people are going to want to try to ride it out. Let him sleep it off, see if he gets better, kind of thing, if they think they could get punished on the back end. So, but in this case, I don't think she's being punished for necessarily the kid getting into the weed gummies. It seems like to me she's being punished for waiting several days before seeking medical care or telling anybody. The negligence wasn't just that he got into the weed gummies. That was an accident. That was something that happened. The negligence was letting him be sick for days and not getting better before finally, maybe not even her, maybe a friend or another family member sought help. That's the negligence. That's what she's being punished for. If she had brought him in immediately, I doubt, first of all, he'd still be alive. But even if he had died, she wouldn't be facing criminal charges. So while I do agree that we need to be careful with how we handle things like this, I would like, and part of me would like to think that people can handle the nuance of somebody that actually was neglectful versus somebody that, just sought medical care immediately. Maybe they can't. So, thinking about that aspect, maybe it's best if she's not punished too severely. But I'll leave all that up to the lawyers and the prosecutors, and I'll certainly try to keep up to date and give any important updates on this story as it comes along. But just to kind of summarize, this death that's being reported as a THC death across the news was most certainly not a THC death. First of all, it's not even the THC that immediately comes to mind when you think of THC. Delta 9 THC is naturally occurring, comes from the plant. Delta 8 THC also technically is naturally occurring in incredibly, incredibly small amounts, but never naturally occurring in large enough amounts to isolate to be used. So where does it come from? It comes from hemp, which has had the CBD extracted from it, and the CBD has converted it into Delta 8 THC. And that can have toxicity that's different from THC. In addition, the conversion of CBD to Delta 8 THC will introduce chemical reagents, solvents, contaminants, byproducts will result that have their own medicinal effects and toxicities. And so if you end up consuming a large amount of Delta 8 THC, you're going to also consequently consume a large amount of contaminants, and that could cause harm, whether that's long-term harm or acute harm, potentially leading up to death, and particularly in children because they weigh a lot less than adults and they can't handle nearly as much as adults. And so if a child is known to encounter cannabis or hemp products, get them medical attention immediately. They will be fine. Do not delay. I don't know how punishments go in different areas or all that, but as of now, in most cases, I haven't seen parents being punished for getting prompt medical attention for their children. And yeah, so this death was not due to cannabis. This is not a cannabis death. Hopefully, as more information comes to light, the news will report this more accurately and not give the impression that cannabis has something to do with this death when it really doesn't. It more has to do with negligence, and honestly, I think likely, sadly, this kid probably got into something other than these gummies that were admitted to. And also, it doesn't surprise me if Dorothy was confused about what was actually in that bottle, because the marketing around these gas station hemp products is so sketchy and confusing. She might have legitimately thought it was CBD. Who knows? It might have been labeled as CBD and actually had Delta 8 THC in it. You don't know. So one final reminder on this podcast: if you're going to buy THC or cannabis products, only do so from state licensed dispensaries in your state, whether that be a medical dispensary if you have a recommendation, or an adult use dispensary. That's the only way that you can be assured that you are getting plant-derived safe THC at the dose listed on the package, that has been tested for at least some amount of contaminants and has an accountability system built in where if something does go wrong, they can identify who did it, where the product came from, recall it, and levy punishments against that company if needed. The stuff at the gas station, they may never find the person behind whoever made these gummies that ultimately may have resulted in this child's death. So with that, I just want to thank you again for listening to Concentrates with Dr. T. Again, follow me on YouTube, Concentrates with Dr. T, or Spotify, and find me on TikTok at dr.towle. I'm most active on TikTok at this point. I'm going to start trying to push more out to Instagram and Facebook and other platforms. But for now, if you want to find short form content, interesting content about cannabis, find me on TikTok. Thank you and have a great day.